Good evening, everyone. And again, I add my voice to Payal's in thanking all of you for being here. And of course, Nina, Shuli, Ritu, and Anjali join us in welcoming all of you here today. You know, it's really splendid to see a full house because I've been very, very keen to bring this first speaker of the evening today to all of you here. And it's taken a while to really get her time. The reason I've been so keen to do this is that we all take democracy as a kind of fixed entity, you know, a kind of political journey that's finished, that's enlightened, and we are all lucky to be a part of. But the truth is that democracies aren't fixed entities. They're always different kinds of forces pulling it in different directions, you know, down different fault lines of what constitutes the correct route for the economy to move in, what constitutes development, what constitutes our civilizational values, you know, fault lines that divide us between majority communities and minority communities. Just what is the dominant discourse about the entire direction that the country should take. And of course, we are governed by the Constitution, but the Constitution is only an idea. It may be the book, it may express itself through law, but it only stays as strong as long as we have defenders that actually believe in it and keep it as a living document amongst all of us. And the first speaker today is one of those band of people who really keep the Constitution as a living document amongst all of us. What's interesting is that this band of people who we call activists, NGOs, you know, it's a broad brush with which we tar both the good and the bad that constitute that community. But particularly Aruna Roy is somebody that both the previous government and this government has been very wary of. She was, in a way, part of the previous government as part of the National Advisory Council that was constituted by Sonia Gandhi. But what it ended up being essentially was an adversarial role because it represented a different idea of the direction that India should be moving in as opposed to what the government led by Mr. Manmohan Singh represented. And now with this government in place, there are an equal, if not more, magnified anxieties that have been put into place. And Aruna, in a way, represents the bulwark against those forces. You know, in 2011, Time magazine declared her as one of the 100 most powerful, influential people in the world. She's won the Magsaysay Award. You know, she's universally known as one of the architects of the right to information movement. She's also always stood for the constitutional values that must accrue to the poor and the disenfranchised, which includes the right to work, the right to food security, all the things which I must say self-critically creates a lot of anxiety in this class of people that we all belong to, including me. One sees it as wasteful, one sees it as breaking the spine of the economy, as wasteful expenditure. So it's really important to hear somebody who really walks the grounds of this country to understand why is that battle an important one. Aruna was, of course, an IAS officer, but she left that to start working amongst the poor, and then in 1984 to really join the poor when she started the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, you know, known everywhere as MKSS. And today, that session that we've called Why I Fight is to really understand why someone of her privileges would give up the life that she could have to really labor on our behalf as a safety valve of democracy. So ladies and gentlemen, to listen to that story and to understand those concerns from the horse's mouth, literally, please welcome Aruna Roy. Aruna's just flown in last night from abroad where she was getting an award. She's also fallen down and hurt herself, and she has a viral fever. So many, many thanks for being here, Aruna, and keeping your word. Aruna, you know, I'm not sure how much of our audience is familiar with your work, so before I plunge us into, you know, both the politics and the practice of you know, what has constituted your life, will you first answer a very fundamental question, which is, why did you give up the privileged life of being an IAS officer, if I may call it a privileged life, and decide to really submerge yourself in the life of the disenfranchised in Rajasthan?
I think privilege is, for me, a very relative definition. What is privilege? Is privilege being able to live with economic security? Is it being able to afford to buy all the things you want to buy? Or is privilege the ability to live a harmonious moral life where you don't feel threatened by your inner self every night? You question yourself whether you've done something right or wrong, whether you've actually signed away something which should not have been signed away, whether you've been duped by your subordinate officers into taking a wrong decision. In my opinion, it was much more harrowing living that life than being without creature comforts. So I think it's all relative. And this question I've answered many different ways. I think it's the one question that always gets put to me. But I think it is, one doesn't get powerless by leaving that. Actually, one redefines power. I think no one wants to be powerless. Let's be quite frank about it. As a woman, I want to be empowered. I fight for people's empowerment, so I don't want to really enter a life of disempowerment. But it's a question of how you see it. And I think best defined by an ex-batchmate of mine who once met me after many years. And some of them said, oh, poor Aruna, you know, she's been living without creature comforts and this and that. He said, you know, it's a debatable question as to whether it's more comfortable to sleep peacefully every night or to live with an AC in your room. So I think in a way it's a relative issue. And I think for me, creature comforts lay in having a free conscience, a good conscience, and not having to worry about whether I was doing something wrong every single day of my life.
So Aruna, I'm going to come back to some of the key concerns that have dominated your life. But before that, you know, there is this sense now of, as I said, a kind of escalated anxiety about the direction that our country is taking. And of course, that's not a singular position. There are others who are very hopeful about the direction this country is taking. In the introduction, I mentioned that in some ways you were very adversarial with the previous UPA government and the direction that that was taking us. Today we have the NDA government led by Mr. Modi. You have always been on the ground fighting constitutional battles. Are you today in any way more worried about what the direction this country is taking under this regime than you were, say, under the UPA, and why? And secondly, I'll zero in on Rajasthan, you know, after you answered that.
See, I don't think I've lived all through independent India. I was born just a year before we got independence. So we've always had an anti-establishment position. We've always been adversarial. And I think no Indian is happy unless we criticize the government. So it's been forever. I don't think there's been a time in my life when I've not heard criticism of the government, whether it was Jawaharlal Nehru or subsequently many other prime ministers. We've always had something to say about everybody. But I think what sets me very worried now, and I think what this NDA government, what really makes me feel it's a critical period and it's a crisis. Let's not forget that in 1947, I was in Delhi as a very young child. 1 year old actually, but I still have emotional memories of partition. This country was divided by a bloodbath. We built a new India on blood. And within 1 year, Gandhiji was assassinated. And I think we bought with all that 40 years of relative peace when we decided to live with each other in amity and well, as much comfort as possible. We understood, I think, very deeply that religious divide can lead to extraordinary strife. And I also think we understood somewhere deep down inside ourselves that we didn't want a theocratic state. And the constitution that was framed thereafter, it took 4 years for the constitution to really come to be. And in that period, I think what Ambedkar and the Constituent Assembly gave us was a very sensible, logical way to deal with India. And if they decided that we needed a non-theocratic state, that we needed a republic, so if they decided we needed a republic with a constitution with equal rights, it was in the interest of India. It was the interest of keeping our territories secure. It was in the interest of making our people happy. It was in the interest of that Constituent Assembly. It's unfortunate that I have to say it. I'm sure people my age probably know, but I don't know if the younger people even know that the Constituent Assembly had every kind of sector in it. It had all kinds of people, and they decided that they needed in India, that was the way it was defined by the Constitution. So today, when it's really threatened with the kind of hatred, kind of divisiveness, with the kind of of fanning religious hatred, I'm very worried. And what has happened is that many of my friends say that it's the post-ideological, it's post-truth and it's post-ideology, this phase. But what it has done is, once you strip a country of an ideology or an idea based not on what some people say, but on a piece of paper logically worked out like the Constitution, you really dismantle the oneness of things. So what we see now is the emergence of conflict, of identities at levels unimaginable to India. I have been going to Maharashtra, of course I'm in Rajasthan, I go to Tamil Nadu, and the kinds of caste groupings that are coming about now, and the kind of politics that they are playing within the democratic frame is really frightening. So I think, for me, therefore, it was very, very important that we keep the idea of an India that was constitutionally secure. And I think this government probably has been threatening the Constitution in many ways, and that's what worries me.
So Aruna, you know, there is a kind of, I would say, soundproofness that invades all of us. You know, I don't know if we did a raise of hands over here. I'm not sure how many of us here would share that anxiety. You know, how many in the audience would share that anxiety. I know that when I have conversations with friends with great alarm about, say, the lynchings that have happened in Rajasthan or elsewhere in the country, you know, there is a sense that, oh, these are isolated law and order issues. It's not that one is being alarmist about this. There have always been, you know, incidents of violence, as one puts it. And we've had BJP ministers speaking in parliament, or Mr. Jaitley and others saying that, oh, treat these as isolated law and order issues, that there is nothing programmed or systematic about the dissemination of hate. Let's come into Rajasthan, where there have been 4 horrific killings over the last year. Do you see this as law and order? Are you seeing anything very fairly evidence-based, which is programmatic and systematic about hate creation?
I think, you know, people normally don't hate. We've lived in fair degree of amity. I don't know if you travel in rural India, but if you travel in rural India, you'll find that there are animosities, there are quarrels. It's natural to have differences, natural to fight, natural to, you know, even be slightly violent sometimes, you know, probably beating each other up. It's normal. But in terms of wanting to kill and annihilate, it's a strategy that comes into our being only when we build up the latent hatred that each one of us has. Look at, I'll just make one comparison with the Right to Information campaign. In the Right to Information campaign, when we sat on our long, prolonged dharna for 40 days in a town called Biawar in central Rajasthan in 1996, from where the demand for the right to information began with the MKSS going on a long struggle, what it did, and I understood then, theoretically, was it gave people a platform to feel good, gave people a platform to feel that they would be empowered to fight corruption. It gave people a platform to understand that they had a tool, they would evolve a tool to book government to be accountable. Similarly, you can create platforms which do just the opposite. Because each one of us has the potential for hatred. Each one of us has the potential for love and compassion. Each one of us has the potential for everything. What the state or a system should actually do is to promote the compassion, promote the desire for justice, promote the desire for equality and equity, and then it's a good government. But if a government keeps quiet, like Rajasthan government did after the Alwar incident, then it's a serious issue. The police don't take action. And as an ex-IAS officer, I know that the police should take action. The police don't take action. Then it's the responsibility of the senior civil administration. If the civil administration doesn't take action, it's the responsibility of the state government. So why was there not immediate action taken against that lynching? Why was there an attempt to make the lynchers seem morally secure? And why was the person who was lynched, who was not really taking cattle out to slaughter, because are we going to deny Muslims the right to be animal husbandry, to practice animal husbandry? Are we going to say they can't have milch cattle? So the whole thing was so screwed up, really. And that, and the other thing that is a fallout, and that is where I'm really worried, because most of us seem to get paralyzed when we feel the state is inactive. Even if we feel something is wrong, we get paralyzed into inaction. And one of the worst things that is now developed is fear. Because we feel that if we say something, something will happen to me, my children, something will happen to my daughters, something will happen to my family. So we are drummed into silence. So this, if you see this as a sequence, then it's worrying. It's really worrying.
So Aruna, you're still sticking to the particular incidents, you know, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with these incidents. The worst one, of course, was when a man called Afrazul from Bengal, just an ordinary labor, was killed by someone called Shamshul, and actually just like hacked to death. And then because he was still a little bit alive, he was burnt, set on fire while he was alive. And his minor nephew, 13 or 14 years old, was filming that. And then Shamshul comes onto the camera and says with pride, this is what is going to happen to all of you if you don't stop love jihad, which itself is a piece of fiction, you know. So that's only one. There was Pehlu Khan and all the others as well. But Aruna, you're sticking to the sequence of these incidents, and it's true, they are momentary arrests, and then everyone is let off on bail. And much like what has happened in the, in the Mutalik case, that even where you saw on video that there was this thing happening, he's been let off. So, you know, nobody follows through to see whether any retribution actually comes to these people. But I'm talking about, is there any further program? Is there a psychological war going on? Is there any civilizational war going on? Is all these stories about history textbooks being rewritten, being done at a scale that people of this class sitting here in this hall should worry about, and why?
You must all forgive me, but I have a habit of looking for reasons. My mother was a student of mathematics and physics, so I think she put it into my head to look for real rational reasons why anything goes wrong or right. And I suppose no matter whether I'm an activist, and you'll all see me as passionate within inverted commas, or shouting away or talking animatedly, but you're not motivated by just passion. You're motivated by reason. You might eventually become passionate. Of course, there is a strategy. And the strategy is that you build up a culture of hatred by insidious conditioning. If it's obvious conditioning, you can fight it. But insidious conditioning is very difficult to fight. And what has happened is, but I'll give you the more obvious examples. In the last so many years, the textbooks are being changed all over the country. It's not only Rajasthan, by the way. And actually, we had filed a Supreme Court writ to say that textbooks should be with an independent authority which looks at textbooks as history, as fact, as the heritage of a country, not really the heritage of a political party or a government. Anyway, the Supreme Court set aside, dismissed our case, so that was the end of it. But nevertheless, this is many years ago. But I'm talking about now. In Maharashtra, I don't know how many of you know that medieval India is not part of the curriculum. Medieval India, the whole chunk is out. In Rajasthan, we are saying that actually the whole war between Udaipur and Akbar, the Maharana Udaipur and Akbar, was wrongly recorded. So we are retwisting everything. Now, we have also taken out mention of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Why? He was a person who liberated India from Sati. What was the mistake in having Raja Ram Mohan Roy as part of your knowledge? To understand that Hinduism has a self-reformatory, self-corrective mechanism. It's good to know that we've corrected our mistakes. That's been removed. RTI has been removed. RTI was Rajasthan's gift to the country. They've removed it because in any case, right to information began in Rajasthan. All these chunks have been removed. Our children are going to come out extremely warped. And let me tell you that I don't know how many of you know about Femida Riaz. She's a Pakistani poet and she says, "Tum bhi hum jaise nikle." I don't know how many of you heard her poem. And I went to Islamabad 2 years ago, and I understood how distorted their understanding of the history of this subcontinent is in Pakistan, because they have tampered with their textbooks. Why should we do that? We should have the courage to say this is history. And in this history, we take this position. Argue it out if you don't agree with it. But you can't distort history. Once we tamper with rationality, with facts, then tomorrow we are the victims. Let's understand this very clearly, because these processes don't end where we want it to end. It goes full cycle. And in that full cycle, we'll be the victims of that kind of strategy. So that's the whole thing. Then the other things that I look at what it's done on the other side. While we are talking about violence against Muslims and lynching, violence against women has multiplied. Witches are being burnt. Middle-aged women are being stripped and paraded in the villages of Rajasthan for not even for any sexual crime, just because there was a land dispute. You have people stoned. I mean, extraordinary things are recurring. So once you unleash irrationality on a society, and this is my great fear, it's got nothing to do with a political party, it's got nothing to do with any specific incident, but it is with a process. Because if we set aside rationality and we bring in superstition and bring in hatred and we bring in all kinds of various side effects that those bring, then we are really distorting society. And tomorrow we live in a perpetually violent and completely a society without rules, regulations, without the law. There'll be no rule of law.
So, but Aruna, there would be a counter-argument to this, which many people might have, which is to say that in all the years that the Congress was in power, that there was a certain kind of weighting of history as well. You know, that it's the left liberal intellectual elite that also skewed history in a particular way, and this is part of political process. You have a different kind of political vision now in power, and it's their right to change the discourse, you know. How would you respond to that?
I think, let's not say that the Congress and the left are the same. That would be the first political blunder you will make. Let's understand that the Congress is a centralist party. It's not a left party. So the left is different from Congress. Congress has always been a party in compromise. Let's also understand that.
Well, so is the left. I was using it more as a kind of intellectual division of left versus right.
I agree, but I just wanted to make that difference very clear. And let's also understand that Nehru was a Fabian socialist. And the Fabian socialist was very different from a communist. Jayaprakash Narayan was also a Fabian socialist. They are very different. See, that's the problem nowadays, is that we, because of the kind of education we are all getting, we are getting more and more specialized and less understanding of the larger generalities of life, which are so important for democracy. You have to understand much more than one specialization. But today's system of education is getting us into situations where we are brilliant in our subject, but we simply don't understand. Just one example, I went to the Indian Institute of Science when I was doing the RTI campaigning and spoke in Bangalore, all senior scientists. And when I said to them, how many of you know about the Constitution? They knew nothing. They'd never opened the book. They'd never touched the book. They didn't know what the preamble was. Nothing. But they're super scientists. So if we are going to be this way in this country, I mean, I don't know very much about science. Maybe I'll buy any kind of yarn spun by anybody, thinking it's true. But it won't be. So I think what we are really arguing for now, in one sense, is some basic broad-based education in which we understand certain things. Of course, the Congress was to blame in part, the left was to blame in part, but that does not justify what's going on now. As a rationalist, I'm not speaking as anybody who's this, that, or the other today, but as my mother's daughter, I would like to see rationality prevail. I would like to see things happen and the causality be established properly and accurately.
So in fact, you know, when we were talking earlier, just to kind of finish this part of it, I don't think you've entirely shared the full range of actually how history is being distorted, Aruna, but I want to move on. You were saying earlier that even beyond the ideology, what is really alarming you as someone who has always passionately or rationally advocated for information is that what is being done to the history textbooks now is afactual. It is unfactual. It is not even correct. So it's not merely an ideological battle, that it's just plain lies. Is that a fair statement?
It would be if you look at what's being said about Gandhi, for instance. Amazing things that are being said about Gandhi in the public discourse. The textbook itself may say what it has to say, but they have removed, I think, I'm not quite sure because I haven't seen the textbook, but I've heard said that Godse's name has been removed from the textbook as the assassin of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, if you remove his name, what are you proving? But I know definitely that in Gwalior, the Hindu Mahasabha has established a temple to Godse. It happened on the day I was in Gwalior. So if this is what we're doing, then there are huge issues, huge questions we have to answer. It's all right, then we should really rewrite history and say that India is different and that Mahatma Gandhi, so far as Mahatma Gandhi is concerned, the stories I've heard are shocking. I think everyone is a human being. Gandhi was a human being. He made mistakes. He said crazy things. But he also did remarkably good things. So we take him as a totality, we see what he did wrong, what he did right, we critique him. But today the discourse on Gandhi and the narratives on Gandhi are shocking. The kind of things that are being said are so entirely false that they say, for instance, that he created Pakistan, which is not true, because he fought against the idea of Pakistan. They also say that he was responsible for so many other things that went wrong in this country, including the fact that they say he gave money away to, this is by the way, I don't know how many of you heard this, but I've heard this for the last 40 years, that Gandhi gave away money to Pakistan, which was rightfully India's. When India got divided between Pakistan and India, the money in the exchequer was divided. You know, it was obviously, it would happen. A proportionately, money went to Pakistan. Now, these become huge issues. Yeah.
No, I was just saying that if it has been there for 40 years, then it's not a new problem. It's not that...
No. Some of the narratives are old narratives, but they were subterranean narratives. Nobody dared speak about this in the public domain. There has been one ideological position in India which has evolved a series of narratives. See, whether the left has got a series of narratives, or the right wing has got a series of narratives, or the centralists have got a series of narratives, since none of us in this room are really die-hard political party members, we should actually bring rationality to serve on them. So we should be able to say, this textbook gives you the facts. Now you take any critique that you like. There can be the Ambedkar critique on Gandhi, there can be the left critique on Gandhi, and there can be the RSS critique on Gandhi. But you must know that there are three critiques on Gandhi.
Yeah. Sure. I just quickly share with you, why one is harping on this conversation is that just in the last week, there have been 2 whistleblowers from within the BJP's IT cell, and where they are literally talking, there are photographs of them with Arvind Gupta and with Mr. Modi and with others, and they're talking about the kind of really sustained program that is coming out of the BJP IT cell. The journalist Swati Chaturvedi had documented this, but now these are whistleblowers coming out. And they're talking about how 20,000 pages of, basically fake identities and fake news is being put out from these cells. There are false pages in the name of the army. He says that while working there, I lost my insaniyat, and that he was paid 30,000 rupees. So basically it's a point of employment, and that there are young people there who are, he is specifically talking, you can go and look at this online, and it worries one that when there is a whistleblower out there saying this, and we're all silent, and nobody's really examining this, so the fact that we forget that there is a program, official program of hatred being created is something that I think we all need to take on board. But Aruna, now let me just shift away a little bit to another question, which is that there is a great impatience against the activist class. And there is a sense that, they're noisemakers, they're nuisance. Today, a lot of the spine of the civil society movement in this country has been broken. And again, that's not just something that the BJP has done. The seeds of that was really with the UPA. Foreign money, foreign contribution, all of that has been disallowed. And you can see the kind of silencing that's happening in the country. So again, to ask you that, how would you be self-critical about activists across this country, and also that in their absence, in the fact that money has been taken away from this constituency, Is it true that they were fanning people's upset and that people are not naturally upset, that activists were creating that atmosphere of upset? And can you give some examples of the kind of things that are happening on the ground which don't find voice when civil society is silenced?
Let me begin by saying that the biggest problem of the communist regime all over the world was that they didn't allow civil society to function. And the system corroded itself. It burst because of corruption, because of mismanagement, because of lack of accountability, because of thieving, because of so many things. The big movement against communism actually began with a reaction against totalitarianism. And in every democracy, you need space for dissent, disagreement, and you need for difference. You can go back to Socrates. You don't have to talk to me. You can go back to Plato's Republic. You can go anywhere you like. But if the moment you remove dissent from a society, you're finished. So what does activism actually do? And let me also say that NGOs are not activists. NGOs are people who run projects. Activists are people who mostly don't take funding from abroad. For instance, the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, where I work, we raise crowdfunding. We all take minimum wages as salary. 6,210 rupees is all I get a month. So in any case, we do not depend on foreign funding. Every campaign of ours which has come to, now I can't even come to Jantar Mantar, but when I did come to Jantar Mantar, or when we did come to Jantar Mantar, we were funded by people. They raised their own money. We had accounts and we were transparent because we are a transparency campaign. You could come and check who gave money, what amount. Each village raised its own resources to send people. So campaigns like that, which are crowd-funded, had no question of being dependent on money. So the government has waged war of 3 kinds, or 4 kinds, but I'll just highlight a couple. One is against funded NGOs. Now, funded NGOs are probably the ones that they targeted most with the human rights organizations. Because to fight a human rights case, you need money to go to court, you need lawyers' fees, you need so many things to happen, you need investigation. So perhaps they attacked human rights. And also people who raised fundamental questions against development like Narmada, or like the Kudankulam campaign in South India, where you raised basic questions about development choices. Then the third was the whole democratic set of democratic campaigns where you demanded rights, demanded a share of constitutional sovereignty, like the Right to Information campaign, the Right to Food campaign, the Right to Work campaign, saying citizenship and independence doesn't mean that I cast a vote. It means I have a right to a decent living. After all, where is my equity? Where is my equality? And I don't think there is maybe enough time to discuss it, but I fundamentally think that my class, which is I belong to, was by birth, and by default now I'm in a different place. But in that community, we think people don't work, but let me tell you that in these 40 years or more that I've lived in rural Rajasthan and in many other rural areas, I'm amazed at how much work they put in and how much faith they still have in the system, how much they really still hope. So I think it's a huge betrayal of that huge class of people who really keep many of our lives going, to say that you don't have a right to food, that you don't have a right to a home, that you don't have a right to a right, which I enjoy as a privileged person. So I think that group is still fighting, will continue to fight. But one thing I want to tell you all, friends, I guess you all live in Delhi and thereabouts, that the denial of this public space of protest, which is Jantar Mantar, is a tragedy. Because now they're telling us, and I leave it to you to decide whether it's fair, people who come here to protest don't get, say, 200 rupees a month pension. That's what Government of India gives an unorganized sector worker. So when we demand that we must at least get 1,000 rupees as pension after spending all these years at work, because she can't break stone or she can't dig earth. When she comes to Delhi now, all my friends and my colleagues from wherever, they'll have to pay 50,000 rupees a day to hire Ram Leela grounds. I ask you, is this fair? Can a democracy run when you don't give space for people to voice their protest? After all, there would be no right to information. I don't know how many of you used RTI in this room? At least there are a few hands here. So we gave you the RTI by spending 11 years on the streets of India. We slept on many roads, many corners. We slept with the police surrounding us. You know, we really use the road. The road is people's parliament.
Absolutely.
So if you deny us that access to my parliament, which is the only place I can go to talk to people, to convince the newspaper journalists, to meet people like Shoma, to meet so many others I met through these protests. So I met so many people just because we were there. We met journalists, we met judges, we met whole sector of Indian people, and also people from our class who contributed in many ways to the right to information. How will you have a dialogue like this if you disallow us the streets? So in a serious way, democracy cannot persist unless there is the space for anti-establishment opinions to be aired. Because after all, the issues that are raised are of general interest. There are issues which arise from denial of constitutional rights, denial of justice, denial of various other promises made, which affects all of us. Today, 60 lakh people use the RTI every year. 60 lakhs. So if these 60 lakhs people use the RTI every year, it's the poor people of Rajasthan and many other states who have actually struggled to get it to you. So I think when people say to me, I met somebody in Hyderabad, I went for the literary festival, and one guy said to me, you're always negative, you don't do anything positive. What have you done? He said to me in Hindi, तुमने क्या किया हमारे लिए? So I said, आपने क्या किया हमारे लिए? बताइए. I said, मैंने आपको तो एक RTI तो दे दिया ना. आपने मेरे लिए क्या दिया? So it's through these various protests that you get rights and you get monitoring and a process through which you can enforce some kind of accountability on a system which has now become riddled with corruption, no matter which political party it is, which ideology it is. There is no transparency and no accountability. We want transparency and accountability. We must give public space to people's voices.
So in fact, I just very quickly wanted to share with you, Ankur, if I could just ask you to play those two little clips of the pensioner, who did not get the money. While you're just queuing that, I just wanted to reinforce something which Aruna just said, that once I was talking to a Maoist leader in Chhattisgarh and challenged him about why they choose the path of violence, and he said something which I will never forget. And he said that when the tribals of India Gherao a DM's office, or they are just peacefully demanding that they have the rights that Aruna is talking about, which are constitutionally promised to all of us. He said there's no media coverage, there's absolutely no interest in it. And it's only when you kidnap a DM or you kill somebody that the media or the country looks at you, and then maybe by default the issues get discussed. So I always remember that essentially protest has to be a theater of protest. You need a spectator for a protest to be valid and for it to get heard. And I think that, as I said, Aruna Roy and others are safety valves for us, and we are completely silencing that and cutting off the sound that we need to hear for all of us to stay safe. And I'm going to quickly ask Aruna next about the education campaign that they've been running in Rajasthan, but first, if you can just show that clip.
एकला जो जा?
हाँ मैं एकली हूँ।
अब पेंशन कतरा महीना बंद हुई थोके?
मैं मौकों को पर्ची में लिखा है वो वैसा से लेके
ओली पहला आई रही है।
वो कल के अन्ना चौक महीना चौक वे गया।
तो कतरा सेक महीना वे गया क्या बता बिया?
चौक महीना वे गया उतना कौन
क्या वे गया?
नहीं आप थोड़ी बंद हुई नहीं।
हाँ।
भाई कौन बात है ना जने मार पोतो है। ये तो इधर का है। तो वो ये जान बेम जाने भी कोशिश की दिया। ये मैं तहसील में की हिंदी जने के भाई के
क्या डोगरी
मरगी इनके बन गए एक गी के
कौन मरगी
माँ बिया के क्या मरगी
6 महीना पहले तो डाकियो देन जाता हो के
कोई चनका
हाँ
चनका तो मैं वो देन जाता फेवरेट
Ankur, if you fade
हाँ
that out.
डाकियो देके
आगे दे तो
because we're running out of time, Aruna, will you quickly explain what is the significance of this? You know, I'm sure everybody in the audience has emotively got it, but if you can just reinforce that.
Actually, in a way, it follows up with the last question about activism. See, activism is not just fighting against the government. It also deals with engaging with government on its promises. So as following the right to information, Government of Rajasthan publishes all its information, and we also have something called Rajasthan Sampark. So we did a yatra. We took 100 days all over Rajasthan. We collected innumerable complaints from people about what was not happening, and we filed it into this Rajasthan Sampark, which is a portal. And when we went and met the government in Rajasthan, they said 3 lakh pensioners are fraud. I said, 3 lakh pensioners are fraud? How can that be? It's a huge number. I can understand if a few thousands are not correct. So we accessed information about our own panchayat, and we brought it back, and it said 40 people were dead. We went house to house. 29 people were alive. Some of them had left, so we couldn't ascertain, and about 5 were dead. So we brought this information to Delhi. We had a press conference, actually, in the Women's Press Club, where we brought these people to Delhi to show that they were alive. Now, this woman was also declared dead. Now, actually, she's died. Now, if a woman like that, who gets these meager amount of 500 rupees a month, which is all she survives on, if you deny her that, I mean, it's, for me, she may as well be in a concentration camp. I don't see why she's in an independent country with a citizenship, whether she has the Aadhaar card or the Bhamasha card or this card or that card, makes absolutely no difference. So when she can't actually, there are innumerable other problems. But the fact is, how can you declare her dead? Just because she can't go to the Bhim Tehsil, because she's too old to declare she's alive, or more often than not, most government officials just decide whether you're dead or not, whether you're there or not, sitting in a government office far away, because they must complete their figures and send it on to the state capital. That's it. They must show their work is completed. So finally, a number of such pensions have been restored, but still the work is going on. So when you talk about democratic government, governance, and people's protest, and people on the streets, and you talk about people like us who are struggling all the time, we are not there to criticize and bring down governments. We are there to make them work for us. And in the working for us, it's extremely hard business. It's extremely hard business, and you have to go through it bit by bit. And this case is an exemplary case. And of course, there are many such cases. And it happened also not only in this, but in the right to food also. Arbitrary dismissal of people, just removing them. And what happens today? If you remove a woman's name from the ration list, she becomes a non-citizen. Because she's not in the ration list, she's declared dead. She's dead everywhere. She can't go anywhere. You declared her dead on a pension list. She's dead on a ration list. She's dead for health benefits. She's dead everywhere. You realize, in one stroke of the pen, you're a non-person. Look at the impact it has on an individual for whom every single paisa matters. She was kept alive by the good offices of her neighbors, who gave her old rotis every day, which she used to dissolve in water and eat.
And like you said, that's after a lifetime of work, you know, because we forget that they're also workers and they're not just charity cases. Okay, we've run out of time. I'm going to open this up for questions. Just while I'm reading the questions that have come in, Aruna, could you very, very quickly share the status of education and the absence of teachers, which is the latest campaign that you're working on, and how the girls of Rajasthan are standing up for it, you know? Okay. I'll just quickly...
Anyway, very quickly, the other thing that is of great concern to me, as well as most women in this room, is girls' literacy, girls' schooling. And we in Rajasthan have now started sending our girls to school. So Bhim is a small town. It's the subdivisional headquarter. And on the 2nd of October, 3 years ago, the children decided they were not going to do Swachh Abhiyan, but they were going to protest against non-posting of teachers in their school. 700 students and 4 teachers. They didn't have a teacher for science, mathematics, computers, name it, and they didn't have a teacher. So they just locked their school and went on a rally. And they came to us and said, you have to now stand with us. So we said, of course we'll stand with you. So we joined them. And ultimately, the lockout that they did in their school spiraled into at least 4,000 schools all over Rajasthan about hearsay, because it was reported in the newspapers by the Patrika. It was a snowballing effect. So many schools, girls just locked it and said, boys' school get teachers, more teachers than we do. They, of course, are also not fully staffed. What is this nonsense? Said Gandhiji taught us to fight for our rights. He didn't teach us only to clean toilets. That was their slogan.
So, Aruna, there's a question from Navneet which says that, figuratively speaking, why is there a 0-1 between an AC and a non-AC existence? Why would you conclude that someone who hasn't given up the AC life doesn't contribute?
I don't think so at all. I think you can contribute. But the point is that while you have the AC, you have to also recognize that you can probably consume a little less. And that you can probably say that out of my earnings, a certain percentage of what I earn goes to somebody. I mean, I don't think we have to deprive ourselves. Even I don't think I'm that kind of a person who deprives myself. I read books. I also listen to music. I've not deprived myself. But I also have a feeling that if I get, I must share. The notion of sharing is absent in us. And the notion of sharing is important in India. Because please, let's remember that in 2017, what percentage of the money was with?
Yeah. I was just going to reinforce that. In fact, somebody recently, one of the government or some, I'm just trying to remember, sorry, it slipped my mind, who said it, but someone who would not normally quote this figure, but that 1% of India has captured 73% of the wealth that is being created. That's 1% of India capturing 73%, and then the top 10% own 58% of accumulated wealth, you know. So really, when we're talking equity, that's a very, very stark figure. There's a question here which says that, have people like Arvind Kejriwal leveraged the activist movement to fulfill their own megalomaniac tendencies? Rohit wants to know that.
See, the trouble is that if you think that that was the only movement in India, then yes. But I don't think so. It was the only movement that got media space. And I remember a German television company, at the same time, we had a different position to Arvind Kejriwal. So we were a lot in the media those days because we thought that one horrendous Lokpal will not finish corruption. We needed a package of measures. So he came to me and he asked me, why are there 25 TV cameras in Ramlila to cover 15,000 people? So I said to him, this is a question you should ask the media. Because all protests and all activism doesn't begin and end in Delhi. And it's an amazing country, ours. You just go into India and you see in every district, in every tehsil, you find people agitated about public lack of ethics. You find people willing to stake their lives. And those 62 RTI activists, RTI users, not activists, who've lost their lives, are ordinary people who felt upset about public money being misused. So in this country, we have 1 million movements. The only thing I think, as Shoma said, was that we don't find any space in media today. But if you go to Sainath's website, Pari, you might find some of us there. So the thing is that you can't finish off protest. Protest will survive. And whether media looks at us or doesn't look at us, we survive. And if we only perform to media, then there's something totally wrong with us.
In fact, this is the first time that the farmers' movement got some attention when they came to Bombay. Otherwise, in the past, when you've had lakhs and lakhs of farmers or tribals coming into the city, they've only been looked at as a traffic nuisance, and none of the issues that they're fighting for have ever been highlighted. But there's just one last question, which is again from, this is from Varun Khurana, that with the recent apology by Arvind, I'm sorry that all the questions are about Arvind, to another politician he accused of being a drug lord, do you think it takes away not only the credibility of activists turning politicians, but is giving power to wrongdoers in our country of filing lawsuits and scaring away activists?
it doesn't matter if you talk about Arvind Kejriwal because you're all Delhiwalas or neighbors. I don't know how many of you live in Haryana. But Indian politics is much more than Arvind Kejriwal, but I'll answer that question. See, the thing is today, with one comment on him, but you know, I think if you take the burden of alternative politics, which he did, then you have to be very careful about the positions you take and stick to them. Because it's not only what you do to yourself, but what you do to a genre of politics, what you do to a whole brethren who are fighting on moral grounds. But if you look at the other side today, the entire system is so corroded and so corrupt that all the institutions of democracy are now no longer delivering. So your courts don't deliver, your parliament doesn't deliver, your other institutions don't deliver, and that's why I think you and I have an enormously large role to play, because we must, at least over there, demand that these institutions perform ethically and according to the constitutional norms prescribed for their performance. Because if we don't do that, one day we will go. That famous Niels Mohler poem about the Nazis, that's what will happen to us. So we really need to ask, and these are very valid questions you put to me, but I think it's complex, it's not so simple. But I still can't commend Mr. Kejriwal for first raising it and then withdrawing it. I think one has to think these things through before one takes these very important decisions.
One last question to end on, and literally in a second, Aruna, if you can answer, but it's an important question. Sheena Arora is asking, what can we do to help? What action can we take?
I think you should engage with issues. I think you can't anymore sit on the sidelines. And I think you can engage with issues, you can raise questions, you can use the laws, you can let me just say it with Gandhi's famous lines. Gandhiji said there are 3 ways of dealing with it. And he said in Hindi, Seva, Sangharsh, or Nirman. So Seva is charity. At least give the hungry some food. Give the people who are dying of cold some blankets or some shelter. The other thing he said was Sangharsh, where you feel protest will help. Protest today is on the internet. You don't even have to go and sit in Jantar Mantar. You can shoot off a letter. You can start in something.org, some other complaint or protest. And the third, he said, is Nirman, which is creatively dealing with it. Creatively dealing with the issue. All 3 are open to you. And charity in terms of money is open to this class. You can always give money, if nothing else, to people who are willing to give much of their time to work.
Thank you very, very much, Aruna. Just talking about the complexity of this country, I just wanted to throw one fact into the conversation, which is that, yes, it's disappointing that Arvind Kejriwal has apologized, but it is, again, the nature of our country that the People's Representative Act now disqualifies any politician if they are convicted for 2 years by even a sessions court. And he has almost 30, 40 cases going on in the country. So with an extremely hostile government against him, very easily he could be convicted on very flimsy grounds, which would pretty much disqualify him from political life. Yes, he should have stood his ground, but it's again a part of the kind of complexity of the processes in this country, and which is why we are constantly grateful for having minds like Aruna's and a host of others who are battling and thinking of these things on our behalf. And I'd like to add to Aruna that if we can just stay aware of issues even before we engage with issues, and listening to you, I'm sure, has enlivened all of us to do that.
Your point that you asked me what you could do. Engage with the electoral process. Make sure that it's better. Look at the EVMs. Look at all these various conditionalities. Look at how the electoral process is in place. It's something illiterate people can't do, but you can all do very easily. Engage with it. Please don't be happy with the way it is today. Question it. Improve it. Reform it.
Thank you very, very much, Aruna. I wish we had more time, because then Aruna could have shared a lot of the stories about why she has stayed engaged for 40 years. But I would urge you really to engage with their work, to know more about it, because if you need a moment of inspiration in your day, Aruna Roy and the MKSS would definitely provide it, and all the fights that they have fought on our behalf. Thank you very much, Aruna.